Hi, I'm not super excited about making this video, but I thought that if it could be helpful for one person, it'd be worth it. So here we go. 10 years ago, my mom killed herself. The day this happened, I remember I was living with my dad and my brother, and I was also very, very depressed at this time in my life. I remember that day specifically, and I remember not having done anything for the entire day because I was just depressed and lying in bed all day, and it took me all my strength and my energy and my dad's help to muster up like the courage to go shower. So that's the only thing I did that day. I showered in the evening. And I also remember texting my mom 4 minutes after 4 in the afternoon, asking her if she wanted to book a hair appointment for me and we could have a coffee at the same time. Of course, what I didn't know then is that it was already too late. And I remember something feeling off, something feeling weird, but I was too depressed to spend any more time on that, so I just went to bed. So I grew up on a farm and we lived pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and my dad woke me up at around 11 p.m. saying that the police was there. This is still one of the hardest things to talk about because it still makes me so emotional every time, and it's like remembering it all in slow motion, and the older I get and the more perspective I have, the more aspects of the situations just made me sad. Then and there, I had no real idea what was going on. They told me that my mom had killed herself in front of a train, and I was just 18 and I had no experience with death. None like this. And I remember my first feelings. The first feeling was relief, and then there was also deep sadness and anger. Death was so incomprehensible to me, and what followed that moment was 10 years up until now of trying to figure out how to live with death and grief and without my mother. I have no idea what order to put this in, but one of the first things I noticed was how life still kept going and kept going so fast. It was this really weird thing where the rest of the world continued acting as if nothing had happened, and it was so easy to be swept up in that. I thought that my life would stop if something like this happened. If someone died, everything would just stop and, I don't know, fall apart. But I still had to finish school. I still thought boys were cute. I still had thoughts and feelings about other things. For me, it was like a lag of emotions, and it took me 2 to 3 years to be able to actually feel my emotions and to have time and space to feel them. It wasn't until after almost 3 years after my mom had died that I decided I needed to take a break, and I had worked enough to save money. So I took a 5-month break from everything from school and work just so I could feel and deal with my emotions. And I think for me, this was one of the most important things I've done in my entire life, because it gave me enough time and space, but also solitude, to really feel my emotions and to work out what it was all about. It gave me the time and space to think about death, but also to be really, really sad. And it was just one of the best things I've ever done for myself, and one of the most important things, I think, for me to be happy today. I remember spending days just screaming and crying on the floor, just missing my mom and not understanding that I would never ever see her again. And I'm thinking that maybe that sounds intimidating, but it was just trying to comprehend the one thing that I would never ever see my mom again. It's still really, really difficult, both to comprehend but also to live with. Apart from feeling my emotions, another thing I found during this time of focusing on grieving was that I found a few tools that were really, really helpful, practical tools that could help me deal with my grief and deal with my emotions and actually bring me forward. And when it comes to death and emotions, sometimes we don't speak enough about what we can actually do, practical things we can change or do or even use, physical tools to make us feel better. So that was really important for me, to structurally work with my emotions and feel them in different ways. So the first thing I did was request the autopsy report. Now, I know that this might sound morbid, but for me it was, and still is, one of my greatest feelings of comfort reading that paper. Reading it so emotionless on paper really validated my feelings. I think sometimes I struggle with not allowing myself to feel things because I'm not really sure if I can trust myself, or if my feelings are real, if my feelings are valid, or if my mom was even dead. There were certainly moments where I wasn't sure if I could certainly know that she was dead. I didn't have any physical evidence that she was dead, couldn't go see her body or anything like that. And I don't know if that's just me, but even to this day, reading that just makes me feel really validated that she is dead. It did happen. It's okay for me to be sad, and she's not coming back because she can't. Because my mom struggled with mental illness, there were also other documents like psychology reports and hospital reports that I also read, which really helped me understand and accept her decision. The second thing, which is a much more positive thing, was my memory book. My therapist gave me this memory book that was made for children, but I was 18, so it was this weird time where I was old enough to make legal decisions, but emotionally, I had no idea what to do. And in this book, I could fill in memories of my mom in a structured way. I put in pictures of her. I think you could put in letters to her, so I wrote a lot of letters to her there. And you also have it sort of all in one go, and it's my favorite item I own in the world, and because I've cried with it so much, and I can just open it and remember all the good and all the bad parts about my mom, which I think is really useful, especially for traumatic deaths like suicide. I was also lucky to have a very, very good therapist. In Sweden, therapy is free, and also every school needs to have a counselor. Luckily, my counselor at my school, she was also a counselor for the crisis center. And as far as my understanding goes, this crisis center specializes with therapists and doctors that help people who are under extreme crisis. So things like trauma, assault, suicide, death, things like that. They help young people live through that. And I found speaking to her so helpful, and she was the only person I spoke to. I still remember walking into her office at school the day after my mom died and saying, "Hey, my mom died." Such a crazy thing to say. And I saw her for 3 years, and she really, really helped me. Another thing I did, because understanding practical things and hearing other people's stories really made me feel validated, so I decided to borrow and read every single book on suicide and mentally ill parents that they had at my library. And I learned a lot of things just from reading those books, especially learning about grieving and traumatic deaths. So when it's, you could say unexpected, but I don't know if suicide is unexpected. I definitely didn't expect my mom to kill herself, but I don't know if unexpected is the right word. But anywho, reading about traumatic deaths and grieving, really, I found that very helpful and practical in relating to how I was feeling. And what else I didn't realize was coming with death was dealing with the practical reality. Like I said, my life didn't just stop, which I really thought it would. I still had to figure out how to practically and physically survive. I feel very grateful that I had my dad to support me during this time. He made sure to deal with anything legal and anything that was adult, so I didn't have to do that because I was really only 18. I did not feel like an adult at all. So me and my dad came up with this plan for me to survive until my graduation, basically. One of the first things we did that I think maybe some people would find weird is that we decided I had to take the train to school the next day. I've struggled with obsessive tendencies, especially when I was depressed, so I was 100% sure I would never be able to take a train again for the rest of my life if I didn't get on that train the next day. It was super, super hard and very, very difficult, but I just knew I had to do it because I didn't want that to have to impact my life so physically for the rest of my life. We also made a plan with my teachers so that I could graduate while spending as little time in school as possible. I was at a dance school, so it was about 50% dance and 50% theory. I spoke to all my teachers and I even settled on some grades, so I decided I would get a B instead of an A and simply not finish and have the chance to get an A, because it was more important for me to not go to school and to finish with any grades than to finish without grades. So I quit all my responsibilities like working, babysitting, anything like that, so I could just stay home and focus on taking care of myself as best as I could. And again, I'm not sure if I'm saying too much or too little, but I remember that death, there's so many moments I didn't expect that were so tragic and so sad. All these moments that I had to deal with that also felt almost embarrassing to talk about, like they are some bad movie or something. But I remember the 2 middle empty seats finishing my dance performance at finishing school, where my mom and my grandmother was supposed to sit and watch it. And that's just so sad. And I remember coming to school the day after my mom's death and my friends talking about train delays, obviously because my mom had killed herself in the same town as where I went to school. And there was so much to deal with, and it was so sad, and it was very overwhelming. But it also taught me something that I think was very important for me, and something I decided on from day one meeting other people. I decided I would never, no matter what, let myself get offended. I can't, nor should I want to, control other people's emotions and feelings and actions. I think joking has to be okay. I think being able to reference things or say things, especially when you're 18, has to be okay. You don't know what other people have gone through, but we, the sad people, we also don't know what they have gone through and what their coping strategy is. And I would never want people around me to be worried that they could offend me, especially if their intention wasn't to cause harm, which it most often isn't. And on the flip side of this also meant that for me, guilt was never really an issue that came to mind. Because just as I can't be responsible for anyone's emotions, I couldn't be responsible for my mom's actions or emotions. That was simply out of my hands. Looking at it this way also helped to accept my mom's suicide, because that was quite difficult, to accept that she had chosen death over the possibility of a lifetime with me. But I think looking at it this way also helped me feel compassion for my mom. I couldn't do anything about her emotions or her feelings. I simply had to accept them, right? And her choice that we can't go back on. I had to accept that fully, and that really helped me in grieving and not being too angry. From media, I guess, I also used to think that everyone who killed themselves wrote suicide letters, but my mom did not. And that was also surprisingly hard to deal with. So I did spend a lot of time trying to learn about her life, especially her last year in life, and how she was doing. I never listened to people who said that there's no point in trying to figure out the why because you'll never know why. It's just so stupid. That is simply their truth from their experiences of life, but there's no point in ever putting your truth onto someone else's life. Learning more about her last year and her really helped me in processing the grief and also accepting her death, and it made me feel so much closer to her. So it was one of the most important things I did. It really helped me in accepting that she was gone, in accepting that she did commit suicide and that's okay, and she didn't have any other option and that's okay. And it's super sad, but if she didn't have another option, she didn't have another option. So I couldn't possibly be angry with her for that. Instead, I just have to feel overwhelming compassion. Another thing I didn't expect that were to happen after she died was the drama. I think it was a week or so after she died, suddenly I had people reaching out to me on social media asking if she died from cancer. And I just got so angry because someone must have said that she died from cancer. And that made me very upset, because for me it was very important to say that she killed herself, because that's what she did and that's the truth. Also, the principal of my school happened to have a friend who lived in the same apartment complex as my mom. So she told all my teachers stories that I'd never even heard. And it was just so completely, utterly stupid. So there are a few things like that I really didn't expect, because I've never had any drama of any sorts like that in my life. So suddenly that once the most profound thing that's ever happened in my life happened, people still had time for that. It was very difficult to deal with. But what did really help was remembering that most of the people around me since I was 18, they didn't have dead parents. Their parents were alive and well, so there was no way they could possibly comprehend what it felt like, and reminding myself of that definitely made me feel better and have more grace when they were maybe acting in less than ideal ways. I've saved the most difficult point to last, of course. The most difficult thing, I think, to this day is missing my mom and still missing her. I just feel like I've heard people say that it gets easier, but in my mind, it's almost the opposite. For me, it gets harder because every day or month or year is a longer time I've gone without seeing my mom. Because I had never gone a whole year without seeing my mom, and now suddenly it's been 10 years and I haven't seen her. And I think sometimes in our very limited human brains, there's still a part of me that can't comprehend why I won't see her in 1 year or in 2, or if I just wait a little bit longer. That was also the most hard thing to deal with after she died. This idea that I would never ever see her again, never, no matter what I did. And I've just never experienced emotional intensity like that. I think one of the things that makes this a bit more difficult for me personally, at least, is that I still struggle very much with how to incorporate her in my afterlife. Things that can help is having photos out of your loved ones and speaking about them and just casually mentioning them in sentences. But I still find it so difficult, especially being around people I don't know super well, to say things like, oh, my mom used to like that. And then I'm so scared that anyone will ask, where is she now, or how did she die? But I am practicing, especially in my relationship, to bring her up more and to make it lighter and to talk about the positive things and to say that just mention memories of her, just like I mention memories of my dad all the time. Because the crazy thing is that we still have a relationship, right? I have a relationship to her still, and figuring out how to conduct that relationship and how to have it in a way that makes me happy is something I'm working a lot with, still 10 years after. I still do many of the things we do in regular relationships. I talk to her, I go visit her when I'm in Sweden. I think of her all the time, and that's by far been the most difficult thing about this, is the manifestation or the realization of true impermanence. Martin Heidegger says, longing is the agony of the nearness of the distance. Grief and death has helped me realize that there are some things that matter and there are some things that don't. And not getting lost in thought is one of the most important things I can do. There's so many more things I could say. I could talk about the best part being after she died and having all the flowers, because they felt like the only time I was truly allowed to grieve, because it was real. I can talk about how close I felt with my brother and my dad after my mom died, because we just had to get through it together. And I can talk about how hard it was finishing school, or how nice it was to leave the country. I don't know, there are just so many things I can talk about that I don't know, what I should talk about and what I should not, and if I should have said something else, but this is all I have for now. And I have no idea how to end this video, so I'll just end it here. Thank you for watching. Bye.